Need that at all.
No.
All right, we have standing by Henry Barbour. Let me give you one quick shot here. Steve Keeler has set a new world record for the heaviest deadlift with one finger. I don't know if you saw this. I never even knew this was competition. 48-year-old UK man deadlifted 285 pounds for 8 seconds with just his middle finger in front of multiple official witnesses. How is that possible? 285 pounds with his middle finger. Keeler has studied martial arts since he was a child, holds a black belt in both karate and judo, which is credits for giving him strong hands. On the lift, he said, "It's incredibly painful, but my fingers are strong, and I'm proud of my lift," reported in the New York Post. 285 pounds with your middle finger. And I don't know what other job that this would be an asset in, but it is a new world record. Henry Barbour is with us. Good morning, sir. How are you?
I'm great, Paul. Good to be with you. And that's very interesting about middle finger. I think Donald Trump lifted the whole country in 2016 with his middle finger.
Now, you just got me off on a different tangent here, but we have some time, so I'll take the tangent. The hearings yesterday, what did you think of that and some of the reports coming out?
Well, I found the hearings, very interesting yesterday, and I think this young lady came across to me as a compelling witness, and I think gave us a look, into the West Wing and what was going on January 6th, and it wasn't pretty.
I think it was a damning day for Trump, but then again, that was one side of the story. Now, she didn't witness this, apparently. This is secondhand. She heard this?
Well, I think the secondhand part is what happened in the president's limo.
Right.
She was told
to me, that was the most damning part.
Well, the fact that she said that the president was okay with letting people through the mags, whether they were armed or not, would not be a good thing. If the president understood that people were armed, that would be, I think, much more damning than him having a temper in the car. But it's huge news, and I think rightly so. And if you understand the layout in the White House, she's sitting outside the Chief of Staff's office. I mean, she's all of 60 feet from the Oval Office, and outside the Chief of Staff's office, where her desk was, is basically Grand Central Station in the West Wing. So she was in a hot spot.
So since we got off on this, let me kind of clarify something. Her name is Cassidy Hutchinson. She was the senior aide to Trump Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, and she talked about former Cassidy Hutchinson. Yes. Did you ask that about Perez or what?
Oh, that was her name, Cassidy. You said Casey.
Cassidy Hutchinson, senior aide to Trump Chief of Staff Meadows, talked about former President Trump's temper tantrum after hearing about an interview where Attorney General Bill Barr said there was no widespread voter fraud. She said this.
And had thrown his lunch against the wall. There was ketchup dripping down the wall, and there's a shattered porcelain plate on the floor.
Then she said Trump tried grabbing the wheel of the presidential limo when the Secret Service canceled his plans to go to the Capitol.
The president reached up towards the front of the vehicle to grab at the steering wheel. Mr. Engel grabbed his arm. "You need to take your hand off the steering wheel. We're going back to the West Wing."
Then she said Trump was furious when the Secret Service nixed his attempt to go to the Capitol.
"I'm the president. Take me up to the Capitol now." To which Bobby responded, "Sir, we have to go back to the West Wing."
Hutchinson talked about what White House counsel Pat Cipollini had to say about Trump going to the Capitol.
"Please make sure we don't go up to the Capitol, Cassidy. We're going to get charged with every crime imaginable if we make that movement happen." There were discussions about him having another speech outside of the Capitol before going in. I know that there was a conversation about him going into the House chamber at one point.
And then she said Trump knew some of the supporters of the January 6th rally were armed, and here's her statement on that.
I don't care that they have weapons. They're not here to hurt me. Take that mags away. Let my people in. They can march to the Capitol from here. Let the people in.
So that's what it was, and I agree with you. It was damning for the president, to which some people said if this was released on the first hearing or during the impeachment trials, then it would have been a different story. So your comments on that?
I don't know. I think to go back in time is mighty difficult. But as we sit here today, certainly it's very disturbing to hear what happened, what was going on inside the White House, and particularly as it relates to, I think, to Mike Pence and the way the president responded. It's not good, certainly for President Trump, somebody who I supported in 16 and 20 and was very pleased with what he was able to accomplish in office. But January 6th is a stain, certainly on his record, and I feel like our party's record.
Let me read you this. This is posted on Newsmax. We also heard it on Fox News. The U.S. Secret Service says it'll cooperate with the House committee investigating the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol after former White House aide yesterday claimed she's heard that Donald Trump lunged at a driver inside the presidential car and demanded that he be taken to the Capitol. According to reports, agents are prepared to go before Congress to flatly contradict the aide's story of an enraged Trump determined to get to the Capitol as a security breach was taking place there. NBC News White House correspondent Peter Alexander tweeted yesterday or last night that 2 Secret Service staffers are set to testify that Trump neither lunged at the wheel of the presidential vehicle, nicknamed the Beast, nor in any way assaulted them in a bid to get them to take him to the Capitol. So there, again, as this with other things, and by the way, he says he doesn't even know her that well. She is upset because he didn't let her go to Florida with him on one of the campaigns or something. So we'll take that story from that one. But let me get to the election last night. Your overview of what happened with the shock, and I'm not too sure it's a shocker, where Steven Palazzo has lost his office.
Yeah, when Steven Palazzo only got 32% in the primary 3 weeks ago, it did not look good for him. And so I think that wasn't a shock. The third district was more the shock, but Mike Ezell is going to go in. The sheriff of Jackson County will be a member of Congress representing the 4th district come the first of next year, and he's going to have his opportunity. Certainly with Palazzo, the loss particularly is that he was really a senior member in the House for appropriations, and that's going to hurt Mississippi. But Steven unfortunately let this kind of get away over the last few years, and so you see the result down on the coast with so many people running against him, and then them all coming together in the runoff to beat.
I want to ask you,
Palazzo.
because you've been around politics. You've been around politics for a long time. Is this a new world where the voters don't really care about seniority as much as they did 10 or 15 years ago? We'll talk about that when we get back. With Henry Barbour, GOP strategist, coming up, housing lender, returning with Henry Barbour, GOP strategist, and we thank you for joining us, sir, live on C-Spire text line. As always, to communicate with you, C-Spire TV, Channel 70, and Super Talk TV. And I asked you the question before, is it a time now where voters don't take in consideration seniority?
I don't think so. I think it's important, and I think it's particularly important in Mississippi, where we're a smaller state. And if we want to have a say, I think we have been served well over time, and I think we will be in the future if people are able to continue to have seniority. But if you kind of fall asleep politically and don't take care of your political business, you'll find yourself, if you're a member of Congress, losing. And I think we have seen that in recent years, where incumbents become vulnerable because they lose touch with the voters. And I think that's what happened on the coast, and I think that's what almost happened in the third district race between Michael Guest, the incumbent, and Michael Cassidy, the challenger, who ran a really good race, have to give the guy credit, and slipped up on Guest and, actually led in the primary, but Guest was able in the 3-week runoff to, I think, finally do some research on his opponent and able to point out things that were inconsistent, I think, with Republican primary voters about Cassidy, especially related to new federal spending, some $48 trillion that Cassidy had promoted on his website. And then when that became public, Cassidy took it down off his website and said he had heard from other conservative voters in the 3rd District and had sort of changed his views. And that didn't go well in the runoff. But I think, to your question, I think seniority still matters, Paul.
Well, I think it still matters. I didn't say that. What I said is it matters to some of the voters, and I think this one shows no. If you disregard them, if you have an attitude of laissez-faire, if you have an attitude of ignoring them, I don't think they take seniority as the overall point where I got to put you back in. And I think this was proven in the Palazzo race.
Yeah, but Palazzo had other issues that I think kind of overcame that. But I do think you're right that there is certainly a segment of Republican primary voters who don't care about it. And there are a lot of them who would like to see us have term limits. Hey, one thing I want to point out that I found interesting looking at the numbers, typically, Paul, in a runoff, you're going to see certainly less voters turn out. But that was not the case yesterday. In fact, in the primary in the 3rd District, you had about 50,000 voters yesterday turning out in the 3rd District. And this is without the final numbers, 68,800. That's 38% more. And looking at Metro Jackson, the turnout was huge. It was 64% increase in Hines, Madison, and Rankin. A 64% increase. It went from about 20,000 votes in Metro Jackson to about 34,000. In Hinds County, it more than doubled the turnout.
Yeah. Well, let me say this about that, because in the interview I had, the last interview I had with Michael Cassidy, I asked him about some of those things on his original informational lease. And I've run for office one time, a long time ago. But anybody in handling politicians, when you put who your deepest thoughts are, your deepest political platform, your deepest commitments, you put them on that advertising that winds up in mailboxes, on TV and radio, whatever. And some of the things he had on there, the $20,000 gift to a newlywed couple if they would stay married, and some of the other tenets, it didn't really matter on the air to me that he took those off, because that simply mean, okay, the people don't like that, I'll put something else on. That's a little wishy-washy. But I don't think a lot of people knew about Michael Cassidy. All they knew is that he ran a pretty good race. He was well-spoken, new fresh face. There was an anti-incumbency, and there was a lot of animosity against Michael Guest on the January 6th validation. So all of that put together. But didn't the GOP establishment pump a lot more money into the Michael Guest runoff than they did Palazzo?
Yes, absolutely. The Congressional Leadership Fund, which is Kevin McCarthy's group out of D.C., they pumped hundreds of thousands of dollars down here. And then you had other independent expenditure groups that also pumped certainly probably $150,000 or something like that, which in this race was able to make a difference. And so Cassidy had all that going against him. And then the revelations, if you will, on the website, it just hurt him because it was inconsistent with where GOP voters are on those types of issues. But I will say, give credit to Michael Cassidy, number one, for running, for challenging the incumbent, and for running a good race. If not for the third candidate, Griffin, getting about 2,700 votes in the primary, Michael Cassidy would be going into Congress come January.
Well, it is a lesson to the incumbents in the House, and I know anybody in the House who just won or will win in November, they're going to have to start running the next day, and it's just one of those things as far as the House of Representatives, the way it's been set up by the founding fathers. I do wonder, as far as any comments on Brian Flowers and his chances in the 2nd District.
Yeah, so Brian Flowers
Neil's
has run before. Yeah, Brian Flowers won with 58% yesterday, ran a good race. Actually, in 2nd District, we saw what typically happens. We had about a 30% decrease in turnout. Brian Flowers will, of course, be taking on the chairman of the January 6th committee, Benny Thompson from Bolton. And I think for Republican voters, everybody wants to beat Benny. And Brian's going to give us an opportunity. I'm a 2nd District voter to get to vote against Benny. And I look forward to doing that come November. And I hope that there's a low turnout come November in Hinds County and Benny can retire.
Would that be a shocker? I will say the last interview we had with Palazzo, and I tasked him on why hasn't he been home? Why did he miss some of those events? He said, "Well, I'm doing them now." And and I'm paraphrasing, but one of the squirreliest comments I've heard. You're doing them now. Why haven't you done them before? He says, "Well, it's a big district. I've been all over there. I've been here and there, but I'm addressing that now." Well, it's a little too late to address it now. So I think it's a good lesson for anybody out there who's running that you have to have that grassroots support. If you don't, you can lose it. And when you have a vote that seems to be negative, and it is a good vote, you got to explain it. You got to explain it in layman's terms that people can understand. Wouldn't you agree with that?
There's no question. I think as a member of the House, particularly, you've got to stay in touch with the voters. And it might get tiresome because it's every 2 years what you've been in. But if you don't stay in touch, you find yourself in the position where Palazzo has now found himself, and Michael Guest too, because Michael Guest was so close to losing, and and quite fortunate it wasn't just two of them in that primary. Had it been, Guest would have lost. So I guarantee you, Michael Guest is going to be much more engaged in this upcoming 24 cycle.
Henry Barbour's my guest. Henry, any thoughts on where we are with a possible lawsuit against the trigger as far as the abortion in the state? Any comments on that?
I don't really know. Yeah, not really my area of expertise. We know for sure there's going to be fights against this. This is an issue that is very passionate for people on both sides. And certainly, as a pro-life American, I couldn't be more pleased with the stand that the Supreme Court took, and I think giving states appropriately the right to decide this thing is much more appropriate than it's decided in state legislatures and in court.
We'll talk about that more next on our own, but we thank you for joining us, sir, as always. Henry Barbour.